Christ calls his followers to surrender to him. Welcome to 5 More Minutes, where we remind each other of the gospel of Jesus. Surrender, as I just said it, made me think of a military term. But that's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is talking about the image of God in us being restored through the Holy Spirit's power received by faith. Which sounds like, I hope, pleasant theological language, but it's very, 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 very practical. And very odd how we miss the beauty of it so quickly. We are in love with love in many respects. And by that I mean romantic love, not a love that includes romance but transcends it also. And in our in-loveness to romance, we can't imagine that we should be allegiant to Christ before our spouse. And yet, when our allegiance is to him, not only are we a better lover because he has never failed us, and therefore out of love for him, we continue to love well even when we don't want to, we also avoid using the other one. Because what happens when we're in love with love, and it's at the top of our allegiance, is we're going to inevitably resent and wait for the other to love us, or expect our love to produce a certain result. And what Christ frees us into through surrender to him is love for the other regardless. This happens in love of country. Of course, men and women can or ought to even love their country of origin. And yet, if love of country is above love of Christ, what happens when the country does something unjust, as every nation in the history of the world has done? Well, if our allegiance is to Christ, we'll find a way to respectfully, lovingly push back from our position, whatever it happens to be within that country. But if our allegiance is to country before it is to Christ, then when it does something unjust or immoral, we won't know what to do. Or, we'll choose the nation over the image of God within us. We see this in families. Jesus' family twice in Mark wanted him basically to stop preaching the gospel. They were very nervous about his implicit and later explicit claims to be Christ. And through that, we hear him say that allegiance to Christ and even to the church transcends family. What's so beautiful about that, though? We're better brothers and sisters, parents and children, cousins, if our allegiance is first and foremost to Christ. Otherwise, there's going to be this expectation, most often not talked about within family, that family allegiance is supposed to trump everything else. And of course it's not, because if it does, it will become its own kind of resentful base. It'll be its own kind of defensive posture. It will stifle growth. One of the most challenging things within families is when people grow up and mature, and then the other family members get to learn to enjoy the grown-up and mature person. When our allegiance is first and foremost to Jesus Christ, then we're better able to listen to our brothers and sisters who are no longer the people they were when they were 14. And we love them. But the love begins with a love for Christ, then moves into that. What we've been doing in church is, or what we began to do in church last week, is look at the attributes of a follower of Christ. And surrender is one of them. And one of the terrific, beautiful, lovely aspects of surrender is it frees us into real love, not transactional love, not a love that uses, not a love that's full of secret and not so secret resentments and expectations, but one that begins with knowing that we're loved by God, knowing that we're reconciled back to God because of the work of Christ, knowing that we have the Holy Spirit, and therefore with eyes made new by the Holy Spirit and the power of God, we move towards the neighbors in our life in love and not in any kind of transactional way. The grace and mercy of Jesus are so lovely in how they free us from the shackles of resentment and fear into actual love for country, for family, for child, for spouse, even for your coworkers. That's it for 5 more minutes this week. I hope that you're encouraged.